Well, for more on how the coronavirus outbreak is affecting the economy, I want to bring in Akiko Fujita. She's an anchor and reporter for Yahoo Finance. So, Akiko, China is the world's second largest economy. How exactly is the coronavirus affecting business there? And is there a ripple effect around the world?
Yeah, we certainly have. I mean, let's start with what we're seeing in the stock market today, although that, of course, is not representative of the economy. What we have seen is a real sentiment shift today. The Dow down more than 200 points as a result of these new cases that are being reported outside of China. I know you've been focused a lot on some of these Asian countries. Japan, obviously, with the cruise liner there. South Korea now reporting more than 200 confirmed cases. And then, of course, we've heard some of the reports outside of the region, like Italy, like Lebanon, like Iran, and that is certainly starting to affect the sentiment here in the U.S. markets. The broader economic impact still to be determined, but what we are seeing are companies now coming forward with the earnings season, talking about the kind of impact they're likely to see. We started the week with the announcement coming from Apple saying that they are likely to not meet their revenue target this quarter because they simply have supply chain issues. The factories that they rely on over in China had a very long Lunar New Year because of concerns of the outbreak. There are concerns about being able to obtain some of the supplies that are needed in their gadgets, like the iPhone. And then, of course, we've heard from car makers like Land Rover or like a Nissan saying, look, even if our factories are outside of China, we can't get the parts that come from China. And so we're starting to see this ripple effect.
So how exactly are businesses thinking about mitigating those risks?
Well, it's really tough to change, especially for a lot of these companies that have supply chains around the world. You know, Apple is sort of this perfect example. A lot of these tech names that rely on, even if they sell in the U.S., they've got parts that come in from China. They've got factories where they assemble their devices there. So that's one way to look at it. One of the things we've been watching closely is also in transportation. Of course, airlines like United, like Delta, right at the outset did cancel a lot of their flights going into places like China as well as Hong Kong. That will definitely have a hit. We heard from Norwegian Cruise yesterday in their earnings report talking about how this is going to affect their earnings per share by 75 cents. They're going to say now that they're not going to be pushing forward with any of their voyages in Asia over the next 3 quarters or until the third quarter. So what we're seeing is a bit of a mix for the airlines, for these transportation companies, cruise liners. They're simply just canceling their flights and their voyages. But for these bigger global tech companies, it's a lot more difficult to try and mitigate what's happening right now because their supply chains are just so diverse.
So fascinating how it's affected so many industries, from travel to tech to car industry. You mentioned the third quarter. There are some financial experts who have said these effects of the virus could actually extend into the second quarter of 2020. What are the global markets watching for at this point to see how long this could last?
Well, I think the big question is going to be any sign that this has been contained. You know, when you think about how the markets perform midweek, there were signs that maybe the numbers were stabilizing over in China, and investors took that to mean a positive sign that things are starting to quiet down. And yet here we are today talking about additional cases in places like South Korea and then outside of Asia. What it's really going to take, at least for investors to kind of regain the confidence, is to see that things have been contained. Also, that the numbers in China are not fluctuating. I should point out that China, for the second time in the last week now, came out and said they're going to be changing the way they're going to be measuring or taking note of some of these reported cases or confirming the cases of coronavirus because the numbers have fluctuated so much. So while we have seen sort of a calmer, we're not seeing the kind of uptick that we saw over in China in the first several weeks of this outbreak. The fact that we're now seeing cases outside of China is certainly reason for alarm for investors.
I want to thank you so much, Akiko Fujita, joining us from the Yahoo Finance newsroom. Thanks, Akiko.